Jimmy, thank you for joining us today. On behalf of the STC, I'd like to present you with the Honorary Fellows Award.
Thank you. It's lovely.
It's wonderful to have you with us, and thank you for taking some time to go through a couple of questions with us.
Sure, sounds great.
For folks who don't know, Jimmy is the founder of Wikipedia, and he has really honestly rocked the world. For the things that have changed in the way people access information, use information, and the way people think about information in their everyday lives. A lot of you may not know it, but Wikipedia is worldwide. I'm going to spend a couple minutes and Jimmy's going to share some of his thoughts about Wikipedia, the future of information, and how information is really changing how people deal with facts around the globe. So Jimmy, 2008 was one heck of a year for all of us, but at the same time, Wikipedia continued to rock the world. You've gone global, you have how many sites, how many volumes are out there?
Well, we're in a total of over 250 different languages, but I usually don't count most of those. I normally only want to count Wikipedia language as being fully launched once we have 1,000 articles. So that right now is 157 different languages. It's actually a fun project you can do sometime. Go and find the list of languages in Wikipedia and scan down the list until you find a language and you say, I don't know what that language is. I don't know who speaks it or who those people are, and click and learn about it. It's kind of fun.
Excellent. Now, as you've spread globally and as these changes have happened, what's the next set of innovations that you see coming out for Wikipedia? What's the next big thing?
Well, one of the big things that we have going on right now is a usability initiative. So we got a major grant from the Stanton Foundation. We're hiring some people to do usability studies and to do some programming. What we really want to do is bring more people into the conversation, to broaden out the number of people who can edit in Wikipedia. Right now, of course, it's very open for editing, and we like that, and we want that to continue. But right now, the actual editing is a little bit geeky, and so unfortunately, this excludes a lot of people who have a lot of knowledge. They're geeks of some kind, but not computer geeks. So that's one of the major initiatives for this year, is to really make the software more usable for everyone.
Well, excellent. A large percentage of the STC members are actually human factors and usability professionals. They deal in that aspect of information.
You need help.
So
come give us advice.
And I'm sure they will. It's one of the excellent things is to hear that you're doing that. One of the other things that's out there that's in people's mind is as Wikipedia goes out there, we see Britannica, we see other places that have been more historically considered the referees or the arbiters of information, but they're even beginning to follow your format a little bit. What role do you see for referee journals, things like that? How do you see that playing with Wikipedia?
Well, so I think there's something interesting going on. I always say everybody tells jokes, but we still have professional comedians. And I think that one way to look at this whole thing is to say things are changing. Things are changing in the sense that lots of people who are very intelligent people who would not have been involved in writing an encyclopedia before because of a variety of reasons, mostly as it turns out technological, are now able to participate and able to get involved. At the same time, I'm not one of the people who might be some kind of cyber utopian who imagines that in the future we won't have newspapers or journalists, we'll all just talk to each other on blogs and things like that. I think there's very much a role for people who are professionals. So for example, referee journal. I can see those changing, or the business model of those changing very much, but the basic idea of somebody doing original research that is then reviewed by people who are credentialed and very authoritative in that field, that's not going to change. That's very valuable. It may take place under the auspices of a traditional journal and all the expenses associated with that, but the main thing will still take place.
Excellent. So you kind of see a role for these folks to still have some toll gate in there to make sure that stuff is correct.
I think so. In certain contexts, I think that's invaluable. I wouldn't use the word toll gate exactly because I think most of this is going to happen for free. Not that it's free. I mean, everybody has to eat and so forth, but it's part of an auxiliary part of what a university professor does, for example.
I think that makes sense. That takes it back to, it's a new model, but in many, many ways it's an old model. It's a model of professional community, knowledge sharing, sharing of an opus of work, more or less.
Absolutely. And I think even with Wikipedia, which is a very, very open project, one of the things that people often don't understand about it, people think of Wikipedia as somehow being 10 million people each adding one sentence each, and somehow it becomes an encyclopedia. But really, it's more about a core community of people that's really traditional in our outlook. In other words, we're looking for good quality sources. You know, do you have a good reference for that? oh, is that reference really good? Is that reference not good? All of the kinds of things that you would traditionally do in scholarly thinking and writing are very near and dear to our hearts. So things are radically new, but maybe not so much after all.
So you've basically taken the community and you've extended it across geographies, taken it a little bit out of time as well because it can be changed over time. So you get to see it be much more organic. Do you believe that the information is stronger because of that?
I think in a lot of ways it's stronger. Of course, everybody knows, because the media loves to report every time there's some kind of an error in Wikipedia. But I think what is underreported and what is really interesting is even fairly obscure things where people will have, you'll have 5 to 10 people really working hard and debating every last detail of how we word something. It's really been vetted by a lot of people, and there's a lot of thought and a lot of passion that's gone into it. And that topic might be, the mayor of Atlanta in 1943, where people are really going back and forth to get something just right. That for me is one of the most amazing things.
So a lot of the debate that goes on behind the scenes on other pieces of information is a little bit more public here, but that's good because more people can enter, not the fray, but they can bring more to the table.
That's right, more people can enter, and I like the way you say not the fray. I mean, one of the interesting things about the Wikipedia community is that we try really hard not to fight too much. I mean, obviously we have arguments and things like this, but what we see, many people assume that the big debates within Wikipedia are somehow going to be the left wing versus the right wing or something like this. But what we find really is that most of the debate that goes on within Wikipedia is a much more about quality of information, about sourcing. Sometimes there's a little bit of a political undercurrent to the debate. But for the most part, we have more concern for getting it right than for anything else.
Excellent. Now there's some discussion out there, and I don't know if it's come from your folks actually or just general rumor out in the blogosphere, that you guys are considering some stabilization period for highly contentious areas, letting something have a cooling off time.
Well, so the media is all up in arms about it today. I suppose by the time this tape runs, it'll be all over by then, but it's really interesting because what's going on is that every time there's any kind of a change to Wikipedia policy, it gets interpreted by the media as some kind of closing down of Wikipedia. It's a much more subtle and much more complex thing than that. But in general, my goal and our goal as a community is to really preserve the ethos that anyone can edit at any time. That you can come to Wikipedia and get started and you'll be welcomed immediately. And that over time, as you get to be trusted by the community, your edits will have a stronger say and things like this. So nothing really material is changing.
Excellent. Now, Jimmy, when we were talking off camera, you mentioned that you're in Swahili and other places where there's no classic encyclopedia and that there's not that much shared knowledge. Are you being used by educational institutions? How do you see that going? What impact are you having in those developing and emerging nations?
So it varies. When we look at India, for example, India, of course, has a very strong IT sector. Most of the people working in IT, of course, are fluent in English. But they also have a great passion for their home language. And so we're seeing some of the Indian languages grow very, very quickly and becoming, quite large, 30, 40,000 articles. We'll probably see within the next year or so, we'll see the first Indian language hit 100,000 articles. And so in a place like this, what this is, I hope, helping is for people to follow the rungs of the ladder up. Those who are the most educated, they get information from English and they put it into their language, which then other people have access to.
Now, one final question on the international front. In countries that are not as democratic or as developed, do you see the government playing a role? Do you see them blocking Wikipedia? Do you see Wikipedia being used in different unexpected ways?
Yes and no. I guess the biggest example or the biggest case that I would say that we know about would be China. We were completely banned in China for just over 3 years. Then we were suddenly unblocked just before the Olympics, along with a lot of other websites. They've had a general opening up of the internet in China. After we were unblocked, I went and met with the minister at the State Council Information Office and had a friendly conversation. No real conclusion to it, but a friendly conversation. And we don't think they're going to block us again anytime soon. I mean, you never know with China, but we're pretty optimistic. In other places around the world, sometimes there's filtering of individual pages. In Tunisia, for example, there are certain opposition political figures who simply can't be mentioned online or the page gets filtered out. But even those places, they let through all the rest of Wikipedia, which is pretty valuable. And then we see things, people editing Wikipedia kind of on the sly from certain places and things like that.
So Jimmy, on behalf of the STC, thank you for joining us this evening and for accepting this award. Now, before we let you go, one final question. What's keeping you up at night in 2009?
Well, the main thing that keeps me up at night is jet lag. I travel all over the world. I'm meeting with volunteers everywhere. I try to make sure we get press coverage in India and Africa and places like this to let people know, hey, there's this great global conversation and we want you to come and join it. So I don't get a lot of sleep.
I can imagine. So again, on behalf of the STC, Jimmy, thank you very much.
Thank you.